So our plan today was to leave Whitby on the last available bridge for two reasons. First was that the early morning tide was at about 3:05, so I wanted to get up as late as possible. So we joined the 5 o'clock exodus through the bridge at Whitby, and the reason that's worked out so well is because we've had fair tide for more than half the trip. We were 62 miles to run from the lead-in at Whitby up to Amble, and we were at 20 miles to go before we lost the tide, so it's really quite handy. We're now about 8 miles away. We've got a foul tide now, but it's less than a knot. It's about 0.6 of a knot at the moment, so nothing really to worry about. I'm only a day or two off of spring, so it's not too bad. We're going to do a video going into Amble, and I'm going to do it as though the conditions were different to the way they are today, because if I went the shortcut, it wouldn't be very useful to people coming when it's not possible. So I'm going to go the safe way round rather than the quick way round. Obviously on the day you might decide to cut through the gap. I might have done myself today if it wasn't for the fact that I wanted to do the film. So we're going to go up the side of the Casket Island, or Casket Rock, whatever it's called. And then after that I'm going to take a transit off of a church on the shore, head across to that, and then I'm going to pick up another transit with a white house and the end of the pier going into the entrance to the harbour. And the reason for this is there is a nasty little swell, which we'll talk about when we show you the video. Our plan involves coming up the east side of Cocked Island and following the 20-metre contour, allowing for the fact that there are a couple of little bumps which will make it fluctuate as we go past the top end of the island. And we're going to then pick up a transit to a church which is just to the north of Warkworth Castle, and follow that in until we pick up another transit from a distinct white house which lines up with the end of the pier, the entrance into the harbour. So here we see the first waypoint to the north of Cocked Island. We're going to pick up that transit, which is 275 degrees, to the church which is just next to the castle in Warkworth. And then as we come in, we'll be looking for that last transit, which is the end of the port hand pier wall, forming a line with a distinctive white house in the background. On Navionics, it's really easy to use the compass tool to create transits and then just lay your track line over them when you write your route. So a really useful tool for doing transits. Most people just use it to measure the distance from A to B, but I find it's really, really handy for pilotage planning. Once we get into the entrance with the harbour, we are told to stay close to the port side of the channel because there's a large area which dries, and so we follow that pier wall all the way along until the entrance to the marina. It's worth noting that any pilotage plan that uses contours, in other words depth, has to be adjusted for tide. In this case, going into Amble, we had a tide of about 5 metres on the hour that we arrived. So I needed to add 5 metres to every contour. So for the 20-metre contour, I needed to be at 25 metres depth, and for my turning point onto the final leg, which was at 8 metres, I needed to make sure that I had 13 metres indicated when I made the turn. It's very easy to fall into the trap of just using GPS in situations like this, but of course if the GPS then fails for any reason, then you're really up the creek without a paddle. So the plan we've got here is to use our depth gauge and our clock and the sound signal from Cocked Island, and we can verify where we are, work out using the clock how far along that contour we've gone, and also using the contours themselves, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And we can then, simply using depth adjusted for tide, verify where we are, and in theory we can find our way to that pier wall using dead reckoning. However, remember the GPS is still working, so it's a really good idea to plan your pilotage to not use it, but then to use it as a backup throughout. It's a really great way of increasing your capacity by taking any doubt away. That was the plan, visual transits, finding our way in. In reality, what happened is as we arrived, a sea threat developed, and about a mile or a mile and a half away from Cocked Island, visibility went down to about 100 metres, at times even 50 metres, and we didn't see anything all the way in, and so there are no images of the transits to show you. We'll do another video on leaving in order to show you what they look like in a good day. However, what we'll look at today is how this pilotage worked out when we ended up picking our way into the marina in the fog. So here we're established on our track in towards that first waypoint, and we're 90 degrees relative to the lighthouse at Cockett Island, and we can hear the bell confirming where we think we are. And now, if we're in the right place, we should see the depth gauge dip twice as we go over those bends in the contour before stabilising in again at around 25 metres as we run in towards our waypoint. We should now be able to follow our course into that waypoint and see the depth gauge maintaining within half a metre or so 25 metres, which is our depth adjusted 20 metre contour. We used a clock based on the timing to this point and confirming, since it's working, that the speed over the ground hasn't dramatically changed. At the same time, we can take a regular peek to cheat using the GPS of the chart plotter, and that means we're very, very close to where we think we are when we turn, bearing in mind we're only actually travelling at about 5 knots at this point, so a few seconds makes a very small difference in where we are over the ground. Here the turn's been completed and the calculated heading has been checked and adjusted using course over ground from the GPS, since it's working at this point, and now we can maintain that track, and that means we must be going along that line. At this point we're expecting, by looking at the contours, for the depth to fall to below 10 metres and then to go back above 10 metres and then to fall below 10 metres again as we approach that place called Pan Bush. Pan Bush is the reason for doing this transit. When there's any kind of swell, Pan Bush is dangerous and must be avoided. So the idea was to demonstrate how to get in when there was swell. As it happens, we're in a mill pond but in fog. In fog, this is still the best plan, because if you become uncertain of position at any point, you can turn to starboard, head north, and be in safe water very quickly. Whereas if you go through the gap between Cockett Island and the mainland, you are not certain of having an easy escape route that's always safe. Here, the depth reading has gone back above 15 metres, so 10 metre contour, and our timing indicates that we're just over halfway along the leg. So we're keeping an eye on the clock, and we're waiting for the depth to reduce again, bearing in mind that when we get to the end of our timing, we need to confirm we're in the right place by having roughly the right depth, in this case 13 metres, which is 8 metres for this spot where the turn is, plus 5 metres for the tide. And of course, because it's still working, we're constantly checking it with the GPS just to make sure we haven't got it horribly wrong. As the depth reading goes below 15 metres, which indicates that we're crossing the 10 metre contour again, we're just going to double check that we're the right progress along the route, along that sector, and make sure that our timing is confirmed correct. At this point it is. And note that now we're off the current, I'm maintaining as close as possible 6 knots. There's a really good reason for this. If you're doing 6 knots, it's very simply 1 minute for each tenth of a mile, which makes timing really, really simple. So if you have the power or the ability, it's a great idea to maintain 6 knots when doing pilotage, or 12 knots, because then the numbers are really simple. So here we are on the last minute running into our last waypoint, and at this point I'm trying to maintain 6 knots, so I've got my timing right, but I'm also checking now depth, and I'm trying to make sure that when I get there the depth does read what I expect, in this case 13 metres, and as it happened on the day we ended up with 13.1, which is easily close enough for government work, and was nice to confirm that we're where we were. Not forgetting of course that all this is a bit moot because the GPS and the chart plotter are still doing a sterling job. Finally, as we turn onto that last leg, we start the clock again to make sure our timing is accurate, and now we head down on a known track again using course over ground to confirm it's correct and point ourselves down that final leg. About halfway along this leg we're looking for the depth to start reducing, and at 8 metres I'm going to slow down in readiness for that turn into the harbour, and this represents the 3 metre contour on the chart. At this point we're both looking out to the starboard side, expecting to see the starboard hand mark, which we go past first, appear out of the mist, and that will give us good warning to be ready to turn before the port hand wall. So, not the video we planned, but I hope you found it at least interesting. If you did, please hit that like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell icon to find out next time we release a video, and we'll see you again soon back on the boat jeep. When we leave, we will of course be putting up some photographs on our next video showing you the transits that we would have shown you had the weather been better. See you next time.